Welcome to Casey Cares. We're the voice of Kansas City nonprofits, and we share the stories of local nonprofits and the individuals who drive them. You know, at Casey Cares, we connect the nonprofit and business sectors to enhance the quality of life in Kansas City for both residents and visitors. This Casey Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Elisa Louise Rojas was the apple of her parents' eye, a healthy, joyful toddler. She was doing all the sweet and spirited things little girls do at that age, filling her family's days with laughter and light. Then suddenly, she became sick. After being transported by ambulance to a local hospital in Colorado where the family was living at the time, Elisa was admitted to the ICU. Doctors gave her medication to help her rest. Moments later, her heart stopped. An autopsy later revealed that Elisa's tiny body had been attacked by a common virus. She had died from viral myocarditis. No words can lessen the excruciating pain of losing a child. But in the midst of their unimaginable grief, Elisa's family chose to turn their heartbreak into purpose. From that love, the For Elisa Foundation was born. Today, Elisa's mom, Jana Rojas, joins us to share her daughter's story and the heartfelt work this foundation is doing to bring awareness, hope, and help to other families. Jana, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I'm thrilled to be here.
I don't want to dwell too much on the heartache because I know that I'm sure it never totally goes away. But will you share a little bit about Elisa, though, and the joy of this little girl?
Oh, I would love to. She's one of my favorite topics. She and my other three daughters. Elisa was our firstborn, our oldest, very, very spirited child, lots of energy, lots of enthusiasm, lots of smiles. One thing she really loved was her little teddy bear named Rosie. She had the sweetest little pink teddy bear. And for her second birthday, she got a doctor's kit. And something she would do almost daily was get her doctor's kit out and give Rosie a checkup. Her dad and I both work in healthcare, in physical therapy and athletic training. So she was around healthcare all of her life. And we always just kind of had an inkling that maybe she was going to grow up to be a little doctor or a little nurse someday. Just a really, really neat kid. Lots of fun to be around.
And then you had this horrible thing happen. And how did you get through that? And then we'll move on to how you've really moved forward in helping others.
Yes. One thing I really like to think about and to focus on as we were going through those really, really devastating days was what I refer to as our points of grace. So you can look at something horrible and terrible that just overwhelms your entire life. And I was very fortunate to have the ability to look back and see those things that went well. So while we were in the hospital, right after Elisa had died very, very suddenly, our pediatrician had the day off and she came racing to the hospital to be with me. And she said, Jana, we're going to figure this out. We had no idea what had happened. She said, we're going to figure this out together and we're going to find a way forward for your family. The group that ran Elisa's code, as I looked around all those healthcare providers, I saw tears streaming down their faces. And I knew this wasn't just another day for them. And I knew that moving forward, we needed to do something for other children like Elisa, other families who were in the absolute worst days of their lives, and these healthcare teams who needed better tools and better ability to diagnose and not be caught off guard like they were with Elisa's situation. So looking back, I could see all those people that had rushed to our rescue and had been there for us in these really, really hard times. And I think from identifying and recognizing and appreciating those points of grace is where our foundation came from, wanting to do that for other people.
So this happens. When did the seed or the kernel of wanting to do something in her memory that would help others? How did that really spark from those very dark days?
Yes, I think it started with just a curiosity. First, I had to know what had happened. We had a 1-year-old at the time and had to know if this was something that could happen to other kids. And so I did a ton of research, called dozens of friends in healthcare, and got connected up with other community organizations who gave a lot of insight and perspective and hope, truly, for what we could do to make this better for other families. And I think that helped us out a lot. But it took a while. It takes a lot
Mm.
of time to get through, kind of wade through that. But as I was researching and learning more about where some of the gaps were in identification and diagnosis of myocarditis in kiddos, where the gaps were in treatment, and then also recognizing some families didn't have the support that we had, that they had going through that. They didn't necessarily have the doors they could knock on and the friends they could ask about what happened and why did this happen and how we can make it better. Just recognize that we had to do something to help those other families.
Mm.
Also, selfishly, we had a 1-year-old at the time, and I wanted her to recognize that we can go through hard things and still see light and still see goodness out in the world. And so, how can we really bring that to life for her and then for our subsequent kids, so that they can recognize that you can go through very hard things and come out the other side and make some light and some beauty from those hard times.
So how did you start? How did you begin? And what were those early days like in creating an organization?
It's hard. We were really fortunate. Setting up a 501c3 is not an easy task. So we were very, very fortunate that we have lawyers as friends and family who could help us get some of the nitty gritty set up. But I think the
Right.
foundational pieces that we had to have were a mission. And so we were able to develop a mission based on Elisa's 3 initials that has kind of driven us forward and been our guiding light as we have done this work. So we found that education, E for education, is our first tenet. We found that was really, really important. First, to empower families. All of our friends and families around us who had young children were scared to death that something like this could happen to
Mm.
them. So what can we do to empower other parents? And then now, as our kids are getting older, other teenage athletes to recognize signs and symptoms of potential cardiac compromise, and when it's just getting over being sick, and when maybe you should take your health to the next level and investigate a little bit deeper. We also wanted to provide education to those frontline healthcare providers, because in the process of this, I talked to dozens of ER and community pediatricians and those frontline folks who have to be able to identify those subtle signs and symptoms that are really hard to find in kiddos. And that was a challenge. The cardiologist that I talked to said they could have recognized it if they had seen it, but it's hard to get kids there quickly enough. And so we knew there was definitely a role for education of those frontline providers as well. We also have a tenet around light. So we knew we wanted to provide light and support to other families. And that's based on Elisa's middle initial. And love having the opportunity to do different projects and support families who are going through those hard times. And then finally, research. Pediatric viral myocarditis is not well researched. And so I was working at a children's hospital at the time in Colorado. It was associated with the University of Colorado. So we partnered with them and then have gone on to partner with the Myocarditis Foundation and the Mayo Clinic and University of Florida. Just through our network, finding different researchers who are really focused on pediatric specific disease and how we can identify that a little bit more efficiently so that we can treat it better.
You've got a big plate there of lots of things.
Well, when you base it on what's important when your mission is founded on something that's important and founded, settled and grounded in what we know Elisa to be, it helps kind of drive that work forward.
So you established the foundation actually in Colorado.
We actually set it up here in Kansas City, knowing that we would be moving back at some point. So from the beginning, we were established here, although we were living in Colorado at the time.
And when did you move back to the area?
About 10 years ago, we had the opportunity to come back, and we've loved it. We've been very fortunate. We've gotten established with Children's Mercy and some other local community foundations that have been really helpful. I think there's a lot of benefit in these small grassroots advocacy groups being able to partner up and work together to really create some meaningful impact.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit more. So you moved back here. How did you make those connections and those partnerships?
Great question. I am a person who's not afraid to just knock on doors. And so I asked around and had a friend who was a cardiologist at Children's Mercy and shared what we were trying to do and set up a lunch and learn with the Heart Center staff, who was very, very open to learning more about our foundation. And from there, we brought in a delegate from the Myocarditis Foundation, and just talked about current state, what's happening at Children's Mercy, and what can we do to improve the quality of life for the patients and families, and give providers the tools that might benefit them from the diagnosis and treatment of this. From there, I had the opportunity to develop a nursing continuing education course that compared Elisa's kind of her case study with another case that went differently, that went much better, and provide some of those little subtle signs and symptoms to our nursing staff and providers and respiratory therapists and different folks who are involved in the care of these kiddos. And then from there, kind of made more connections around the organization and have been able to continue working with them very closely.
In your educational programming, do you do things for just quote unquote the general public? Moms and dads, who have young kids who may not be aware of, this kind of condition or other pediatric cardiac conditions.
We do. That's a great point. We've had several booths at 5Ks, or my husband was with a professional soccer team in Colorado. So we had a booth up in the concourse, just sharing information about an AED. How do you turn it on? How do you use it? Where is it? We would bring out CPR mannequins, practicing hands-only CPR. There's so much benefit in that. We even did an education event at our kids' middle school just last fall, talking about the importance of just doing something. There's a lot of research that says if the first 4 minutes after a sudden cardiac arrest are the most critical, and it typically takes up to 6 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. So giving community bystanders the opportunity to not feel scared of turning on an AED and calling 911 and doing hands-only CPR is really, really important to us. So we try to get that word out and share that information in as many places as we possibly can.
So tell us about some of the really heartfelt programs that you all are doing in the community.
Yes, one of my favorites is our Letters from Angels campaign. So Elisa's birthday was February 10th, and she passed away January 28th. And some of the weird things that run through your mind when something like that happens. But one of them was that she wasn't going to get to go to her Valentine's party at preschool. And so then it got me thinking, well, gosh, there's a lot of other kiddos here in the hospital who don't get to go to a Valentine's party. And again, looking at ways that we could kind of lighten the load and ease the burden of being in a hospital. We reached out to our friends and family and said, hey, if you guys want to send us some little Valentines from around the country, just sign it with your first name and where you're from. How cool would it be to put together some little bags, put some little gifts in there, and take those up to the Children's Hospital? So what started from that, I had no idea how big it was going to turn out, but boxes and boxes kept flooding in our front door. And to me, that was honestly a kind of a visualization of the love and light that people have for our family and for other people going through these really hard challenges, pouring right through our front door. And so my toddler at the time could go out and pick up the packages and bring them in and help me unload them and pack up the bags. And I realized what a great exercise it was for her as well to practice that empathy. We would sit down and make cards for other kids. And I still remember one of my favorite things I asked her, what do you think kids in the hospital would like for Valentine's Day? And she's 2. And she listed off a couple things, but she said, we need to bring the heart mugs for mommies because they need coffee in the hospital. So I recognize that, gosh, these kids have a lot of ability to empathize, and we just need to give them those opportunities. So we did it the first year in Colorado. And then after that, we had friends reaching out and saying, I want my kids to do it for our local hospital, or I want my kids' scout troop to sit down and make Valentines. And it just blossomed from there. We've been at over 20 different hospitals in the country, and we had friends in Peru do a Letters from Angels campaign, friends in England do a campaign. In fact, just this year, my sisters-in-law down in South Florida had partnered with a school and ended up with 500 bags of Valentines and little toys. And then their future healthcare leaders club at the high school got to deliver them to Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital and look behind the scenes. They got a tour of the hospital. They got to meet some of the executives. Just a really neat opportunity. We do similar things here in the community with Children's Mercy. They have a fantastic program that our kids get to participate in called Junior Champions, and they can bring their Valentines in and be recognized by the hospital as being a junior champion. But it's also given kids the opportunity to reach out to their friends. We have lots of groups of kids who will get together and create Valentines, talk about, the empathy piece of what would you like to hear when you're in that space. Not necessarily get well soon or have a good day, but what's really helpful? What is something that you'd like to hear that would help you when you're feeling those hard times? So it's been a really cool project to see. We have pictures pouring in from across the country every year, and seeing different kids and even adult groups getting together and thinking about others for a while, and sharing some of that love and light for our Lisa's birthday.
When you go to deliver these, what's that like?
Oh, it's really fun. My dad helps me. He bought this big, almost like cargo van when my kids were little. And we said, "Why do you have a minivan? You don't have kids anymore." He said, "I have to haul all your stuff. You always have projects." And he's not wrong. So we load up boxes and boxes of bags and of Valentines and gifts and games and books. And it's just really neat. We started allowing our kids to have the morning off school so that they could go take them in and really see the impact of all of the things that they've helped us collect and helped us share the message around the community. It's a really heartwarming morning for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. And they're learning lessons that, maybe they aren't learning math that morning, but they're learning very important lessons that, sometimes maybe in school they run into that, but maybe not. Maybe not. Talk a little bit about the research you're funding and where that goes, and how you're getting funds to help pass that along.
Yes, we do a fundraiser every year, kind of a combination of an auction and very informal. My husband and I are not formal people, so we just have a nice little event where we gather our friends and family and raise money for the foundation. And then that money, we've most recently have connected with a researcher who does pediatric specific myocarditis research and has an entire lab dedicated to it at the University of Florida. And so the last 2 years, she's been able to come back and share some of the research that they've been able to do because of our seed funding. Something I didn't really appreciate or understand was that new researchers can't just write to the NIH and get a huge grant. You have to start with the seed funding from smaller foundations. And so we were able to help support those foundational studies that then she could use to represent that there really is a need, and that the larger government grants and larger foundation grants will then help support some of that. And so from the fundraising from our little tiny grassroots organization here in Kansas City, she's been able to raise quite a bit of money to look at the mechanism of myocarditis in pediatric hearts versus adult hearts, because it doesn't act the same necessarily. And then, of course, that impacts how we diagnose and how we treat it. So making huge strides, which is so encouraging.
Well, that's fantastic. You're able to do that and help a researcher get going. As you say, it's not so easy to go find money for some of these pediatric types of health situations. It really seems intuitive that there would be money for it because, there should be breakthroughs, but kudos to you all. You've got a new effort that I wanted you to share a little bit that's just started, Ollie's Branch. Tell us about that.
Yes. So one thing that we found to be really valuable as a smaller nonprofit is partnering with other groups. And so there's this incredible group out of St. Louis. Their founder, Jen Hinkle, was a friend of a friend that we connected. Her child, Ollie, passed away from complications of a congenital heart defect the same month that Elisa passed away, and was just about a year younger. And so we were both going through similar things with a similar passion for creating a foundation. And they've done some really, really amazing work around mental health support. So they've developed a network of therapists that they contract with to help provide support for families. So a lot of times when your child is in the hospital, your child will qualify for some mental health support, at least in the short term. But gosh, it's really hard on families, especially some of these families with kiddos who have critical cardiac diagnoses. It impacts the entire family. It can impact the siblings. It can be the grandparents who are the primary caregivers, and can be any number of people. So they provide mental health support. They started during COVID. It's providing it virtually through Zoom and other avenues, and they continue to provide that, but also in-person support. And it's just an incredible program. We've been able to help several hundred Kansas City area families access mental health programming that either they wouldn't have been able to previously, or it's just so hard sometimes to, when you're in the day-to-day of taking care of a really chronically ill child, to find that time and that connection to get that help for yourself.
So how does that work? Do people reach out to you? I mean, how do you make these connections?
Yes, we have a link on our website that links back to the Ollie's Branch Intake Coordinator. They're based out of St. Louis, but they work nationwide. And they have a simple form that you can fill out to ask for help. And then they'll reach out to you and connect you up with somebody that is the best fit for you and your family and your circumstances.
Now, we should mention you've got 3 daughters. How do you do this? Do you have a staff of 100?
We have, with a lot of help. We're just very, very fortunate that we have a lot of folks who are willing to help and share their expertise along the way. I've learned a lot on the fly from friends who have said, here, I'll help you set up a website, or this is how you do social media. Just learning from other community foundations and being able to lean on people who are also interested. I think I've truly learned along this journey that people want to help. They want to give back. They just kind of need an outlet or need a little bit of a connection to that purpose. And so being able to provide that connection has really allowed us to leverage other people's interests and to help grow.
Well, with that in mind, you can use volunteers, and how do they find you?
Yes, you can find us through our website, so forelisa.org. Always looking for volunteers to help with our fundraisers and with our Letters from Angels campaigns over the winter. Also, always just looking for anybody who has expertise in an area that might be useful to a growing foundation. We're looking for new ways to fundraise, always looking for new ways to connect with different community groups who are interested in our work, and would love to hear from anybody who has interest in helping us grow, for sure.
Well, I had the privilege of getting to watch you in action, working with the nonprofit that I work with, and they had a teen group who did Valentine's, and it was really interesting to see your 3 daughters engage. Can you talk a little bit about that? They're 3 sisters who lost a sister.
Right. Right. So our daughters right now are 9, 11, and 14, and they've grown up with this. This is all they've ever known is For Elisa. But as they've grown, their involvement in the organization has changed. So they've had the opportunity to speak to peer groups about CPR and about AED use. They help me with my social media. They're my little graphic designers. It's amazing what kids can do. But they're ambassadors. Our older daughter was applying for high school, and as part of that, she had to write about her community involvement. And I said, you're an ambassador for a nonprofit. And she kind of thought about it for a minute. She said, yeah, I guess I am. So it's been really cool to see them grow with that. And again, take something that's really, really challenging and very, very hard to go through and turn it into something that you can see the benefit for other people. And that's been a neat opportunity for sure. In fact, I was just looking back at some pictures I saw from one of our early races that we had a booth at. My 3-year-old was doing CPR on the little mannequin right next to her dad. And then we did an event at their middle school just last fall, and she was teaching her friends how to do hands-only CPR. So lots of cool things that we've been able to see. Our kids kind of grow up with this and develop different skills and empathy, I think, which is huge. They definitely have a deeper empathy than I would have imagined otherwise.
We only have a moment or 2 left. Where do you hope the foundation goes in the future?
I hope to be able to continue to move the needle on diagnosis and treatment of myocarditis. I think that is obviously life-changing for patients and families, but also for our care providers who are involved in caring for these kiddos in a really tough situation. I'd like to continue to grow the mental health support and awareness of the need for that for families, just so that families have that resilience and that deeper pool to pull from as they're caring for their kiddos.
Right.
And then continue. I love watching the leadership development in some of these kids and teens who have done our Letters from Angels project, and the empathy that they display for their friends and their community, I think is so inspiring. And I'd love to see that continue to grow.
It's For Elisa Foundation, and the website is ELYSA.org. Check out the organization. Talk about a truly heartfelt, no pun, just from the heart, effort to really address something that can impact anyone. And I just salute you and your family for taking this on and moving that forward. And what a great honor and memorial to your firstborn. So thanks for all you're doing in the community.
Thank you, Ruth. I really appreciate this opportunity.
And thank you for joining us on KC Cares. We're Kansas City's nonprofit voice, and we're produced by Charitable Communications, which is also a nonprofit. This KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. Now, if you'd like to be a guest or to find out about underwriting opportunities, go to our website, kccaresonline.org. And spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio, and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. Don't forget, Saturday mornings, you catch us at 8 a.m. on ESPN